Before we begin, I want to ask you something. If stories like this make you feel something real, if they help you breathe a little easier, remember a little softer, love a little deeper, then stay with me. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. That way you won't miss any of the stories we share here. And now, let's begin. What if the thing that hurt you the most was exactly what taught you to love in a softer way? It sounds strange to say that, almost unfair, almost cruel, because pain shouldn't be a teacher of anything. Pain should just be a passage, just a storm, just something we go through and leave behind. But the truth is, it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes pain stays. Sometimes it settles into corners of the heart we didn't even know existed. And from there, it starts to change the way we see the world, the way we see others, the way we see ourselves. And what once looked like destruction, with time, reveals a design we couldn't see in the middle of the chaos. I believe in something that might sound strange. I believe that the most tender people are almost always the ones who have suffered the most. Not because pain is beautiful, it isn't. Not because suffering makes anyone noble, it doesn't. But because those who have been in the dark know the value of a small light. Those who have felt the weight of abandonment know what it means when someone chooses to stay. Those who have doubted their own worth know the difference a kind word makes, a gesture of care, a look that doesn't judge. The tenderness that is born from pain is different. It's more attentive, more careful, more aware. It knows exactly where it hurts because it has been hurt there before. And that's precisely why it chooses, every single day, not to repeat the cycle. This story is not about romanticizing pain. It's not about pretending that everything happens for a reason, that suffering always leads somewhere beautiful, that all you have to do is wait and the wounds will turn into flowers. This story is about something more honest than that. It's about looking at what hurts and not running away. It's about discovering that we don't need to erase our own scars to build a softer life, that they can actually be the foundation. If you've ever carried something heavy inside you and didn't know what to do with that weight, stay here. Maybe together we'll find a way to turn what weighs us down into something that little by little begins to float.
This is a story about what happens when we stop running from what hurts. It's not about forgetting, nor about pretending the wound never existed. It's about something rarer, harder to explain. It's about looking at our own pain with honesty and, little by little, discovering that it carries seeds of tenderness hidden among the thorns. Throughout this journey, you'll encounter moments of heavy silence, small gestures that heal without warning, and that kind of love that only grows after we learn to care for our own scars. If you've ever felt like you carry something inside you that you still don't know how to transform, maybe this story is a mirror, and maybe, in the reflection, you'll find a path you hadn't yet seen. There's a kind of light that only appears after the storm is gone. It's not stronger or brighter, it's different. It's a light that crosses the sky as if asking permission, as if it knows that the eyes of those who stayed are still too wet for too much brightness. And maybe that's how it is with everything we feel after it hurts. The world doesn't really change, but we start to see it from a different angle, a little slower, a little more attentive to the details that once seemed too small to matter. Pain has this silent effect. It recalibrates the gaze, sharpens perception, and suddenly we notice things that were always there, waiting to be seen. It's like a plant that breaks a branch and still keeps growing. It doesn't grow the same way, doesn't follow the same direction as before, but it grows. It finds another path, bends toward the light, adapts to the space that's left. And there's something deeply human in that movement, in that soft stubbornness to keep going even when a part of us has been torn away. The wound doesn't disappear. The broken branch leaves a mark, but life insists on sprouting wherever it can. And maybe that's the first lesson pain offers without asking anything in return. That surviving doesn't require perfection. It only requires not giving up on looking for the light, even when it comes from an unexpected direction. She remembered a moment like that. One of those days when the weight seemed too heavy to carry alone, when the silence of the house echoed louder than any spoken word. It was on that day that she realized for the first time that she was looking at herself with the same harsh eyes that had once hurt her. And that discovery, small, almost invisible, changed something inside her. It wasn't a grand transformation. There was no epiphany with a soundtrack. It was just a moment of clarity, like when the fog lifts and you finally see the path that was there all along. Later, she would understand that this was the first step, the exact moment when pain began, slowly, to teach her to be gentler with herself.
No one teaches us how to build walls. They just appear, brick by brick, without us noticing, every time something hurts too deeply. It's an ancient instinct, almost animal, this urge to protect ourselves from what has already wounded us once. And at first, these walls seem necessary, seem safe, seem like the only way to keep waking up every day without the chest aching so much. The problem is that, over time, we forget that we were the ones who built them. And even more dangerous, we forget that there's a world outside, waiting, patiently, for us to find the courage to open a crack. She knew this mechanism well. After everything she'd been through, she learned to keep her distance before anyone could get too close. It was subtle at first, a smile that didn't reach the eyes, a message that took days to be answered, a way of changing the subject whenever the conversation got intimate. She didn't realize it, but she was training the people around her to give up on her, little by little. And when they left, she felt a strange mix of relief and loneliness, as if she had won a battle she never wanted to fight. Self-sabotage has this familiar face. It disguises itself as protection, but deep down it's just fear dressed in armor, fear of feeling again what once almost broke her in half. And maybe you do this too, without realizing it. Maybe you've also learned to pull away before being left, to doubt affection before it proves itself real, to sabotage what could be good just because good sometimes scares more than bad. It's not weakness, it's survival. It's the heart trying to shield itself the only way it knows how. But there comes a moment when protection becomes prison, when the walls that saved us start to suffocate us. And recognizing that, admitting that we're locked inside ourselves, is the first step to finding the key. She didn't know it yet, but she was about to discover that some doors only open from the inside.
Tenderness doesn't come back all at once. It doesn't appear like a ray of sunlight breaking through the clouds, nor like a revelation that changes everything in a second. It comes back slowly, almost shyly, like someone knocking on the door without being sure they'll be welcomed. And many times we don't even notice when it arrives, because it hides in the simplest gestures, in the smallest habits, in those things we do without thinking, and that one day, looking back, we realize were the beginning of something new. The first spark of tenderness almost never makes a sound. It just lights up, quietly, and waits for us to notice its glow. For her, that spark came in a gesture that seemed insignificant. One ordinary night, after a day that weighed more than it should, she caught herself making tea with care, choosing the right cup, waiting for the water to reach the exact temperature, sitting slowly by the window as if that moment deserved attention. And there, in that silence, she realized she was doing for herself something she had always wished someone would do for her. It wasn't a big deal. It wasn't anything worth telling. But it was everything. It was the first sign that something inside her was learning to care, to welcome, to treat her own wounds with softer hands. The gentle touch was born exactly where there had once been only tension. And that's how reconstruction begins, not with grand promises or drastic changes, but with small gestures that gradually teach the heart to trust again. A kind word said to the mirror, a pause before self-criticism, a calm no to what causes harm. These are things that seem too small to matter, but that carry immense weight when added together. Each soft gesture is a brick being removed from that old wall. Each act of self-care is a window opening to let in a little air. She didn't know it yet, but she was building, without rush, without a map, the way back to herself.
There's a fear that lives deep in those who have been hurt, the fear of being seen completely, because showing your wounds is a risk. It's handing someone the exact map of where it hurts, trusting that this person won't use that knowledge to hurt you again. And for a long time, she believed that being loved depended on hiding the broken parts, on presenting only the polished version, the version that doesn't scare, the version that doesn't ask for too much. She learned to smile even when she wanted to cry, to say she was fine even when she was falling apart inside, to carry alone the weight that should never have been hers alone. Until one day, without planning, the mask fell. It was in an ordinary conversation, one of those that starts about anything and ends in places you didn't expect. She doesn't remember exactly what she said, only that suddenly she was crying. An old cry, held back for too long, overflowing without permission. And what came next was what changed everything: silence. Not the silence that judges, not the silence that pulls away, but the silence that embraces, that waits, that says without words, "I'm here. There's no need to rush." The person on the other side didn't try to fix it, didn't offer solutions, didn't minimize the pain. They just stayed. And in that moment, she understood that being seen, truly, completely, with the cracks showing, didn't have to be the end. It could be the beginning of something she didn't know yet. This kind of love is different. It doesn't arrive with fireworks of grand promises. It arrives slowly, with careful steps, like someone entering a room where someone is sleeping and doesn't want to wake them. It's a love that observes before acting, that asks before assuming, that respects boundaries even when it wants to cross them. And maybe this is the love that heals, not the one that promises to take the pain away, but the one that agrees to sit beside it without rushing to leave. She was learning little by little that there were people capable of looking at her scars and seeing not flaws, but proof that she had survived. And that by itself was already a rare kind of tenderness.
Healing is not a straight line. No one tells you this at the beginning. No one warns you that there will be days when everything seems resolved, and suddenly a song, a smell, a word said in the wrong tone brings it all back as if it had never left. Old pain has this treacherous way of reappearing when you least expect it, of knocking on the door without warning and entering before you have time to prepare. And in those moments, it's easy to believe that all the progress was an illusion, that nothing really changed, that the wound never healed. It just hid, waiting for the right moment to bleed again. She lived one of those moments when she least expected it. She was fine, or at least thought she was, when something small, a phrase, a gesture, a memory that came from nowhere threw her back to that dark place she swore she had left behind. The body reacted before the mind. The chest tightened, breathing shortened, eyes burned with tears she didn't want to shed. And along with the pain came shame. That cruel voice asking why she hadn't gotten over it yet, why it still hurt so much, why she couldn't just move on. Resistance came first, then fear, and only much later, when there was no strength left to fight, came acceptance. The acceptance that some pains don't disappear, they just change form. And maybe that's what's missing sometimes. Not courage, but company.
someone to hold your hand when the darkness returns, someone to remind you that you've been through this before and survived. Someone who doesn't try to rush the process or pretend everything is fine when it clearly isn't. She learned on that difficult night that facing what still hurts doesn't mean defeating pain once and for all. It just means not running from it, not hating yourself for feeling it, not abandoning yourself at the moment you need yourself the most. And sometimes, just sometimes, that's enough. It's enough to get through one more night and wake up the next day a little more whole than before.
She couldn't say exactly when it happened. There was no grand moment, no movie-worthy epiphany, no voice from the sky announcing that something had finally changed. It was more subtle than that. It was like realizing in the middle of an ordinary day that the weight she had carried for years was a little lighter. It hadn't disappeared. It was still there, but it no longer suffocated like before. And it was in that unexpected lightness that she recognized what had happened without her noticing. At some point, between so many difficult nights and uncertain mornings, she had found her own tenderness again. It was on an autumn afternoon, in a square she used to avoid because it held too many memories. She sat on a wooden bench, the same one where she had cried so many times, and just stayed there, watching the leaves fall, children running, life going on, indifferent to others' pain. And then, without warning, a child tripped near her and started to cry. Before thinking, she stood up, crouched to the girl's height, and said in a voice she barely recognized as her own, "It's okay. Sometimes we fall, but we get back up." And when the child smiled and ran back to her mother, she realized she was smiling too. Not a forced smile, not a smile that hides, a real smile, born from a place inside her that she thought had died long ago. Emotional maturity is not eliminating pain. She understood that there, on that park bench, with the cold wind touching her face and her heart strangely warm. Maturity is learning to transform what hurt into care, into attention, into soft gestures that we offer the world because we know what it's like to need them and not receive them. She had come back to herself, not the old version, not the version that existed before everything broke, but a new version, rebuilt with the pieces that remained and others she found along the way. And this version, imperfect and full of scars, was perhaps the most beautiful she had ever been. Soft love doesn't live in grand gestures. It doesn't need public declarations, eternal promises, grandiose proofs that impress the world. It lives in the details, in the hidden corners of everyday life, in those moments that go unnoticed, but that, when added together, build something immense. It's the way we listen to someone without interrupting, the way we take care of ourselves without guilt, the way we allow others to get close without demanding perfection. Soft love is a daily practice, almost invisible, made of small choices that gradually redesign the way we exist in the world, and the way the world exists inside us. She learned this through practice, making mistakes and starting over more times than she'd like to admit. She learned that listening without rush is an act of love, letting the other finish their sentence, letting silence exist without needing to fill it, being truly present instead of just waiting for your turn to speak. She learned that taking care of herself wasn't selfishness, it was necessity. It was the foundation on which everything else rested. She learned to say no without feeling guilty, to set boundaries without feeling bad, to let people get close without handing over all the keys to the house at once. And she learned, perhaps the hardest thing of all, to celebrate small internal reconciliations, those moments when we forgive ourselves for old mistakes, when we look at our own reflection and instead of criticism, offer gentleness.
The scar doesn't disappear. She knew that now. She knew that some marks stay forever, that some pains leave traces that time doesn't erase. But she also knew that the scar can stop hurting. It can become just a memory, a story etched on the skin, a silent proof that there was battle and there was survival. And when we learn to look at our own scars without fear, without shame, without wanting to hide them, when we learn to touch them with soft fingers and be grateful for everything they taught, that's when love changes form. It stops being search and becomes presence. It stops being lack and becomes choice. It stops being pain and becomes finally tenderness.
And so we arrive at the end of this journey, though perhaps end isn't the right word, because stories like this don't really end. They continue in the silence that follows, in the thoughts that linger, in the way you might look at yourself a little differently tomorrow morning. Pain doesn't have to be a destination. It can be a beginning. It can be the rough stone that, with patience and care, reveals a softer shape hidden inside. What did you feel while listening to this story? Was there a moment when something inside you stirred? A memory that resurfaced? A wound that asked to be seen? These questions don't need answers right now. They're just invitations. Invitations to keep walking, to keep feeling, to keep transforming what weighs into something lighter. If this story touched something in you, subscribe and turn on notifications. Here, each story is a way of remembering that love still lives somewhere, that tenderness is possible even after everything, that we can, all of us, learn to turn pain into something softer. Stories that feel like love. Control plus love.